Hello. Before I start this story, I want to give you a backstory real quick. I'm an 18-year-old female living in Mesa, Arizona. I had started DoorDashing to make some extra money, as working a hostess really wasn't paying the bills like it used to. My little sister, who's 16, and my mom and I had just moved down here from Phoenix, so this is somewhat of a different area to DoorDash in than I'm used to. We started off doing a couple of runs around the area until I got a ping that I have a new order. It was for Little Caesars. I pulled up the map and I headed that way. When we arrived, I had sent in my sister to get the order. While she was in there, I was looking around the parking lot. It was pitch black outside, other than my headlights and the store sign. I noticed a white Jeep and a few teenage guys getting inside of it. I didn't pay much attention afterwards. When my sister got back in the car with the order, I proceeded to the delivery address, with my sister talking to me and music blaring. I pulled into the neighborhood that the map took me to. I then turned on the music to look for the house. We stopped in the middle of the street in front of the house, not realizing that a guy was coming to my door. Now, he didn't say anything at first. I said, "Did you order DoorDash?" And he said, "Yeah," with a little hesitation. I looked behind him, and I saw that there were two other guys heading towards my driver's side door as well. I didn't notice that they had just pulled into the driveway, and they were driving a white Jeep. Before I go any further, my boyfriend has a switchblade knife that he always carries around, so I automatically know the sound of it being opened and closed. After he said yes, I noticed that he got closer to my window, and I was looking at my phone, about to ask him what the name for it was. And when I looked back at him, he was fiddling in his pocket on his right side. He kept looking back and nudging his head forward, kind of in a motion like, "Come here," to the other guys. All of a sudden, when I was about to roll my window down to give him his order, I heard the click, and that's when my brain just pieced it all together. He gave me a weird look, and I said, "You know what, fuck this." And I rolled up my window to where there was about an inch until it was closed, and then locked all the doors and took off. I didn't hear anything from them. They didn't yell out for us. I was really freaking out, and my sister didn't know why I pulled off like that. I explained to her what I heard, and then she pieced it all together as well. When I turned off their street, they then called me and said, "Yeah, this is Mario." And I said, "Yeah, are you the guy I just talked to?" And he said, "Yeah." And then I asked him why I heard a switchblade go off in his pocket, but he ignored the question. I asked him again, and it sounded like he was rushing to get into a car. I then pulled off into a curb, and I told him where he could pick up his food, and then hung up. We sat at the other end of the street for 10 minutes, and when we went back, the food was still there. We picked up the food again, and I was just going to call DoorDash and tell them what happened, and ask that they get a refund, until I saw the teenagers pass by and look straight at me and stop the car. I turned super quickly in the other direction, and I saw one of them get out of the car, then jump back in, and they then turned around and started following us. Now, I'm a crazy driver in general, but when someone's following me, my fight or flight kicked in, and I lost them pretty quickly. I called DoorDash and explained to them what happened and made a report. I don't know what those teenagers were up to, but as a female out at night with her little sister, I was terrified. Not just for me, but for my sister. Some of you may think that I was being overdramatic, and maybe they did just want their food, but if you were in my situation, what else could you really do? It was my safety and my sister's. I called up my boyfriend and told him everything that happened, and I couldn't stop shaking for the rest of the drive home. I couldn't ever figure out why they were at Little Caesars and got there before us. I know it was them who was there. Maybe they were following me back. Maybe not. I guess I'll never know. On the other hand though, I didn't call the cops. There probably wasn't much they could have done anyways, except for file a report. But let's just say, I'll never DoorDash in that area again. So I just moved to California about 4 months ago, and everything's been pretty much a dry run for the worst. My car got rear-ended, My living situation absolutely sucks, and I'm now more broke than I've ever been in my life. I've also had some pretty creepy experiences out here that have definitely forced me to be more on my guard. I come from a small town where you can walk the streets at 2 in the morning and arrive home in one piece. But I now live in a really large part of LA where you have to keep your eyes peeled 24/7. It also doesn't really help that I watch a lot of crime shows and have now become terrified to leave my apartment after these following events. The first happened to my rental car that I was given due to my car accident. I was a full-time DoorDash driver trying to make ends meet in an attempt to squirrel away some cash, as I knew I'd be relying on Lyft rides and would need basic things such as groceries when my time with the rental eventually ran out. My DoorDash shifts typically ran from early in the morning to late in the evening, as LA gas prices and the fancy grocery rates aren't going to pay for themselves. All of that along with my rent to my crazy roommate. Anyway, fast forward, and I dragged myself and my silver Sentra to a grocery store that wasn't too far away from my complex. The incident was short, simple, and very common. I was pulling into a space at the same time as another car. It was a larger tan SUV. At first, I didn't really get a good look at the people inside the vehicle, and without thinking of any circumstance, I pulled in. Now in hindsight, I probably should have submitted and just given the spot to them. However, it was a really long shift, I was tired, and the spot was really close to the grocery's doors. It was dark outside after all, and I figured the shorter walk would be safer. Now, to this day, I can't tell you what possessed me to stay put. Normally I would have gotten out and just put my headphones in without thinking, but this time, something stopped me. I looked back and I noticed the car had parked diagonally behind me. I could easily look back from the driver's side window and see them, and they pulled in so their faces were towards me. There were 2 very oversized men in baseball caps, just looking at me. There was something in the stare that kept me locked solid in the vehicle. I locked all of my doors and kept looking back every so often. They kept their eyes glued on my every move. I felt a terrible feeling wash over me as I then put the car in reverse and exited the lot. Not much of a story, I know, but I really do wonder what the 2 large men would want with a 5'3" petite woman like myself. The worst part of the story is that I really believe I saw the same men in a different parking lot just a few days later. They were parked already and took no note of me, as I luckily sped off into the night. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I'm back at Enterprise. Well, it's the day I have to give the car back, and I'm dreading it. I should also mention that I really don't know anyone in the state of California, and I'm 2,000 miles away from my hometown. I knew that I'd be stranded at home from then on out until I found a car. Sitting at home without any weed can really be a major crisis in a time like this. The one lucky part of this story is there happens to be a dispensary about 3 minutes away from my complex. Well, I decided to take one for the team and walk there. I dressed head to toe, covering my skin. I also made sure to leave early so that there would be more people around. I even had a friend from home on the phone with me the entire time. Unfortunately for me though, this plan fell flat on its face. I walked 1 minute down the road to a gas station, and when I paused at the crosswalk, a dirty-looking man in a white truck made eye contact with me. His windows were rolled down, and he was paused at the stoplight. This is another time where I can be thankful for my intuition, as I just felt something wasn't right about that look in his eye. I stayed out until he drove out of sight, and then made my way, passing the crosswalk. I realized that the man had doubled back and followed me by truck. He made a U-turn and everything. His eyes were still attached to me as I ran back towards the busy gas station and through the busy crosswalk. To my amazement, he turned around yet again, just as I had. He passed me, but not before making that same eye contact with me again as he drove off. This time I stayed put and called for an Uber. Sometimes it's just more worth it to shell out the extra $6. Overall, the time here's been pretty rough, and I really wouldn't recommend moving to the state unless you have people you know here and a good place to live. Please stay safe out there.
On my first summer back home, from freshman year of college, I picked up a part-time job delivering pizzas in my town, around 30 minutes from where I lived. The area in rural Georgia is known for having places in the middle of nowhere, and the pizza place whole shtick was that it delivered to even the most remote areas imaginable within the town limits. I could fill books with the weird experiences from that summer. From the call that came in from a long abandoned warehouse to a dog that got excited about the pizza in my hand and accidentally shredded my pants with her claws. But one will always stand out in my mind as the creepiest. It was fairly late at night, around 10:30 p.m., so I was confident at this time that I would be set on no further calls before closing at 11 p.m. However, someone barely managed to miss the cutoff time, and our clerk accepted their order since they were so close. I was given the address and a single box of hot dough and set on my merry little way. The first red flag was the driveway, or rather, the lack thereof. There was a mailbox, but no actual driveway, not even gravel. It was just grass and barely distinguishable trodden pathway that resembled more of a service trail than it did something frequently used. I bumped along, wondering if I was en route to the place, when I saw a slightly above average sized house come over the horizon, horribly dilapidated and completely surrounded with overgrown woods. I guesstimated where the rest of the driveway led and ended up parking in a grassy patch that could have been a walkway just as easily as it could have been the front yard. My headlights were aimed towards the porch, as per company policy. I walk up to the door, but I believe that calling it a door is generous. It was a door frame, alright, but the door itself was a large slab of wood, propped haphazardly against the side of the house, barely covering the entrance. This was red flag number 2. The third and fourth red flag were also the door. This included an A4 sheet of printer paper with the words, "Around back," scribbled in all caps, which was hanging just below the place where someone had self-engraved the door with the title, "Manson Family Ranch." Typically, I would not go around the back of the house, especially a shady, unlit house, and especially at night. However, it was my last drop off of the day, and I was ready to get it over with and be on my way home. Against better judgment, I trapezed over the back of the house. The door back here is actually a door, but it's covered with black cobwebs and fresh spider webs. Clearly this door has not been used in some time. I found the cleanest area available and knocked. I counted to 45 and knocked again. There were no lights on in the house, and I could hear no movement from inside. I knocked and counted again, and repeated the sequence 3 more times before I was finally creeped out enough and decided to return to my car. As I turned, I finally heard a voice coming from inside the house, clearly agitated, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. I tried to knock 1 more time, and I was counting, and I heard something in the woods behind me. It started out as just movement deep in the trees, but soon enough I could make out distinct running footsteps coming directly towards me through the brush. As I'm standing there, coming to terms with my impending demise, I follow the direction of the noise to the edge of the woods, which is around 15 feet away from me. In the moonlight, I could clearly see the woman who stepped out. She was relatively old, maybe in her 60s, I would guess. She had long blonde gray hair, which was tangled and matted and hung down past her hips. She was in what looked like to be originally a white nightgown, but at this time it was dingy and closer to beige brown color. She was absolutely barefoot, and her feet were covered with dirt and what had to be blood, presumably due to the fact that she had just sprinted through the prickly woods where there's no trail to be seen. I never learned her name, but I still referred to her as red flag number 5. She stopped short when she saw me and started to shake her head no, eyes wide. I stood there like a terrified deer and the most fucked up headlights ever as she took a few more steps towards me, reaching out to me, fingers pointed. Her voice came out way stronger than mine would have been at that time. You know how southern people can either sound like loving grandmothers or backwoods murderers? Well, she sounded like the latter when she drawled, "Oh, no, honey, no, you get on, you get out of here." I wish I could say I listened. I ran, I left, but I was so in shock at how the events were playing out that my own self-preservation was put on the back burner when I tried to figure out just what in the Kentucky Fried Fuck was happening. She seemed to realize that I was not moving, even if I could not make my mouth move to ask her what was happening, or even what to do with the stupid pizza in my hands. She looked at me like she could have smacked the hell out of me right then and there, and proceeded to deliver red flags 6 through 12. "Darling, you hear me? You deaf or dumb? Young girls like you come out here and they don't get to leave." So I finally quit being the white person in a horror movie when I realized that this was not a funny little ghost story. This was a 5'3", 116 pounds me potentially being targeted to be robbed or kidnapped or worse. So I dropped the dumb little pizza, which had serious serial killer toppings by the way, and started running back to my car, which I stupidly left on and unlocked, as was my usual for most of my deliveries. As I neared my car, I heard the slam from behind me. I looked over my shoulder to see the wooden door had been pushed over and had fallen into the porch beneath. As I'm closing into the car door, an older man was limping down the front steps, waving his arms like an airplane runway attendant to me, calling me little bitch, telling me to get out of the fucking car, now. At a loss for what to do, I called out something muttering and shaky along the lines of, "Pizza out back." I floored my dad's shitty late 90s Lexus and somehow managed to avoid the trees on the old trail back to the main road, which was still 12 miles and several turns from the road that actually had a name, let alone painted lines. I reported it to my manager and he said that he would contact the police, but nothing ever came of it that I'm aware of. Either way, this was my first and hopefully last personal encounter with a self-proclaimed Manson family ranch.